welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and I'm going to do something that I haven't done before, which is talk about cards from the newest set, in this case being Dominaria United, that I haven't had the opportunity to talk about in other videos and aren't good enough to make my top 20 list, but could they get some play in Commander, right? So basically, this video is, are these cards good enough to be played in the Commander format? And I'm going to start off with Ertais Scorn, and this is the card that sort of gave me the idea for making this video, because I was looking at it and I was thinking, is this good enough to be played in a Commander game? Are people going to be playing this card? Well, let's find out. It's 1 blue instant counter target spell, but also has this spell cost a blue less to cast if an opponent casts 2 or more spells this turn. So if there is anybody out there still playing cancel, please stop now, okay? I don't like to be that guy that says cards are unplayable in the format. In my opinion, cancel is one of those cards that is just completely unplayable. Apparently, it's still in over 16,000 decks on EDH Rec. There is so many cards that are just strict upgrades. They've printed a few of these in sets in the last year or so where it is doing exactly what cancel is doing, but with a little added bonus as well. So it's just a strict upgrade. Please, if you're still playing cancel, even as a budget option, I imagine this card's not going to be very expensive, so it's going to be a budget option as well. I really don't think there's any reason to keep playing cancel in your deck. But other than that, are people going to be playing this in their Commander decks? You know, I thought obviously 1 blue for a counter spell is not great. There's way better options. But the fact that it cost a blue less to cast if an opponent casts 2 or more spells this turn is pretty darn good. So of course it's just going to cost 1 and a blue, which is pretty fantastic for a counter spell, right? This is just a hard counter spell that is going to counter anything. And of course, the second spell they cast can be countered by this. Once they've put that spell on the stack, they've now cast 2 spells in a turn, and you can respond by countering that second spell if need be. Also can be any opponent. You know, if the situation arises where you have another opponent that casts 2 spells and then you want to counter the other opponent's spell, that works too. I don't know how often that's going to happen, but it is a possibility. Are people going to play this in the format? I think they probably might. How popular will it be? Let me know what you guys think. Here's another card that I wasn't sure if it was going to see much play in the format or not. Obsidian Obelisk, 2 mana artifact, enters the battlefield taps to add a colorless, taps to add 1 mana of any color, spend this only to cast a multicolored spell. How much play is this going to see in the format? Now, it is a 2 mana rock, enters the battlefield tapped, which people don't love. Obviously, if you're looking for a 2 mana rock that just adds colorless, there's lots of options that don't enter the battlefield tapped. Also, though, it's going to add 1 mana of any color to cast a multicolored spell, which can be really good in some decks. I guess the more colors you're playing in a deck, the better this could be. I had considered maybe putting this on my top 20 list, and I was like, you know what? No, I don't think so. I didn't even give it an honorable mention because I thought this could be one of those cards that just doesn't really see a whole lot of play at all, right? It's going to see some play because it's in precons and stuff like that, but outside of that, I don't know how much people are going to actually go after this card to put it in their decks, because as mana rocks go, it's just sort of okay, right? Even if you look at a Coalition Relic or a Commander Sphere, those are 3 mana, but they come into play untapped, so you can use them right away, and they're always going to be adding mana of any color, and they have lots of other bonuses as well. I would probably play both of those over Obsidian Obelisk. Again, though, am I wrong? Let me know in the comments below if this is a card that you are going after and you think fits nicely in a lot of your decks. How about Sphinx of Clear Skies? This is another one that I sort of thought about briefly for my top 20 list, and then I was like, no, it's a little too fringe. So 3 blue, Sphinx 5/5 with flying and ward 2, has domain. When Sphinx of Clear Skies deals combat damage to a player, reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles, put 1 pile into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. So it's doing a fact or fiction type of scenario, which of course is great. If we just ignore that for a second, this is a 5/5 flying ward 2 creature for 5 mana. That alone is pretty darn good. Now, I know people are going to look at this card and go, okay, well, it's great in a 5-color deck because you're essentially getting a fact or fiction whenever it deals combat damage, right? Because you're going to look at the top 5 cards of your library, which is likely the amount of basic land types you're going to control, and then it's going to be essentially a fact or fiction after that. But even in just a 3-color deck, I think it's pretty good, right? In a 3-color deck, you're going to deal damage. You have 3 basic land types. You look at the top 3 3 cards, your opponent is likely going to put 2 cards in one pile and 1 in the other. If the 1 card is the one you want, then you're essentially drawing a card. So this, again, just becomes 5 mana, 5/5 flying ward 2 that draws you a card every time you connect, which is pretty good. Even in a monocolored deck, this is when it connects, it draws you a card, right? Because you're going to look at the top 1 card of your library. Your opponent's going to separate the 1 card into 2 piles, which of course, one of the piles is going to have 0 cards. And then you're going to put the 1 card into your hand. That seems pretty good, right? Even in a monocolored deck, this seems all right. Gets even better if you want stuff in your graveyard, right? Because you're putting the other pile into your graveyard. Just like with a Fact or Fiction, in a graveyard deck, it's extra good because it's sort of a win-win scenario for you. So even though this card seems fringe and seems like you want it maybe in a 5-color deck, I actually think it's pretty good even in a monocolored deck. How about Vesuvin Duplimacy? 3 and a blue enchantment. Whenever you cast a spell that targets only a single artifact or creature you control, create a token that's a copy of that artifact or creature, except it's not legendary. So we're doing the copy thing again and the it's not legendary thing as well. They've been doing this in pretty much every set recently. Of course, targeting those commander players because of course we always want to be copying our commanders, and this will be able to let you do so. This is another card I considered for my top 20 list. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that probably put it in their top cards from the set. I thought it was a little too specific. Whenever you cast a spell that targets only a single artifact or creature you control, how often are you going to be targeting your own stuff? In certain decks, like an Orvar deck, this card is absolutely amazing in that deck, obviously, because you're going to be doing that a lot anyway. If you're in any theme where you are going to be targeting your own stuff a lot with other copy spells, like a Cackling Counterpart, it can be good because, of course, you're targeting something to make a copy of it, and then you're going to make another copy of it. So it can be good there, though I think it's really specific. This might be one of those cards, I see it's already like $14, that is getting a lot of buzz because of what it's doing, and when you put it in your deck, I think you will find you might not be using it as much as you thought you would because you're not targeting your stuff, particularly your commander, as much as you thought you would. I could be wrong. Again, that's what this video is all about. Are these cards good in commander? This is certainly going to see play in commander. I just think it's very specific in what it's doing, so it's only going to go in certain decks. Let's talk about Weatherlight Completed. 2 mana vehicle, 5/5 with flying. And by the way, before I get to the actual ability, I will just point out that completed, although it looks like it's spelled wrong, that's what I thought. Cauldron Complete was done the same way, where you're like, is that how that's spelled? It is a Phyrexian thing, right? Whenever you see completed spelled that way, it is sort of a Phyrexian formation sort of scenario. That's what that word means specifically. So that's not a spelling mistake. Anyway, as long as Weatherlight Completed has 4 or more Phyresis counters on it, it's a Phyrexian creature in addition to its other types. How do we get those counters on it? Well, whenever a creature you control dies, put a Phyresis counter on Weatherlight Completed, then draw a card if it has 7 or more Phyresis counters on it. If it doesn't, scry 1. So this is a card, it's only 2 mana, you can play it pretty early. Again, it's another card that I had considered for my top 20, mostly because it is a colorless draw option, and it used to be back in the day, whenever you had a colorless draw option, it always got lots of attention, it got played lots. I remember when Endless Atlas came out, that immediately got tons of attention and went in a whole bunch of decks. Again, as I've mentioned before, it's a card that is losing popularity because they're just doing lots more card draw options for each individual color. So colorless card draw options in general are sort of losing popularity, and this only draws you a card if there's 7 or more counters on it. Now, creatures you control dying can be happening a lot. It happens in every deck as long as you have creatures. If you're in a deck where you're sacrificing creatures a lot, this can be particularly good. It doesn't have crew, as people will probably notice, because it's crewing itself. I think the idea here is it's coming alive. So once it has 4 counters on it, in other words, once you've had 4 creatures die, or I guess you could proliferate as well, while you're putting those counters on it, you're also scrying, which ain't bad. It will turn itself into a creature, right? So it's going to turn into a 5/5 flying creature once you have 4 counters on it. And then once it has 7 counters on it, it's going to start drawing you cards. Pretty good. You could throw this in just about any deck and it'll be all right for you. Worst case scenario is you're going to scry a little. It is an artifact and then eventually an artifact creature, which means it dies really easy. You could put in a vehicles deck, I guess. I mean, are people excited about this card? Are people going to be putting it in decks? What decks are you going to be putting in? It's interesting because it's a vehicle that doesn't get crewed, so it might not fit in the typical vehicles theme. Again, it is a colorless option for drawing, not a super great one. Maybe the deck to put this in is those decks where you're sacrificing your creatures all the time, possibly. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. But moving on to Chaosic Transformation, 5 and a red sorcery. Exile exile up to one target artifact, up to one target creature, up to one target enchantment, up to one target planeswalker, and or up to one target land. Each permanent exiled this way, its controller reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a card that shares a card type with it. Put that card on the battlefield, then shuffle. So this is a very powerful effect. It's also a very chaotic effect, as you can tell from the name. You're choosing a permanent of every type, which is really good. First of all, this is a red card that will get rid of enchantments. So there is that. Actually, a mono red card that gets rid of every kind of permanent, which can be really good. It's also exiling, which is rare in red. This is up to, so you don't have to hit all the targets. It's not like you have to have everything available. If there is just a Smothering Tithe in play that you really badly want to get off the board, this is 6 mana, exile that Smothering Tithe, and then your opponent gets some other enchantment. Doesn't seem great, but it is an option for you. Same thing goes for any other permanent on the battlefield that you might need to get rid of. Also, though, you can play this on yourself, obviously, right? That's where this card gets really interesting is I can do this, exile my own artifact, and flip into that Chroma's Memorial or something that I have in my deck. I literally just made a deck like this, a blue-red version that has those polymorph type of effects that is doing exactly that because I'm making token creatures and then using those polymorph effects on my own creatures to flip into giant creatures that are in my library because I only have giant creatures in the deck, so I'm guaranteed to get one. So it works in that scenario as well. And of course, it works with all of those different things, whether it be artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker. You can exile a 1 mana enchantment and flip it into an omniscience if you want to. Might take a little bit of setup there, but it is an option. It's a super interesting card for sure. I don't think it's going to see a ton of play in the format. Again, I like that it's a red option for exiling enchantments, but 6 mana is a lot. How much play is this going to see in the format? I guess we'll find out. The last card I'm going to talk about is Thran Portal. This is an interesting one. It is a gate. So it's a land, obviously, and a gate. That can be significant. Obviously, you can go in those gate decks. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or fewer other lands. Of course, we've seen that on a lot of lands as well. As it enters the battlefield, choose a basic land type. So of course, we got to choose forest, swamp, island, plains, or mountain. Those are the 5 basic land types. Thran Portal is the chosen type in addition to its other types. So of course, it's still going to be a gate, but it's also going to be a forest, swamp, whatever you choose, right? Mana abilities of Thran Portal cost an additional 1 life to activate, and that is all. That's all this does, right? So I should note, a lot of people might look at this card and feel a little confused about it. A land type, like a swamp, forest, whatever, whenever any land has the type forest, that means it taps to add green mana. It doesn't matter what it is, it's tapping to add green mana, right? So if you look at something like a Dryad Arbor, that is a forest, which means it taps to add green mana. If something is a swamp, it means it taps to add black mana. It doesn't actually have to say that on the card. So if you choose swamp when this enters the battlefield, that means it can tap to add black mana, even though it doesn't actually say that on the card. When you do that, of course, that's a mana ability that costs an additional 1 life to activate. So it's a very bad swamp, right? That's why this card is like, how much play is this going to see? It is a way to mana fix, and I'm sure a lot of people in the comments will tell me that this is for draft, because a lot of times they will throw cards like this into the draft format so that you have that option to mana fix. It's obviously not a great way to mana fix, but it is an option there, but also it is a gate, and also it is giving you the land types. Another important part of this and why they probably have this in the set is because a lot of things are referring to having those different land types, and there actually are commanders that are looking for land types, and because this card is colorless, it can go in any deck and allows you to choose those land types, right? So now again, getting back to the Sphinx of Clear Skies, if I'm say in a 2-color deck, say I'm in a Simic deck, I'm playing islands and forests, that's 2 basic land types that I have. But if I have a Thran Portal in my deck, now I can play the Thran Portal and choose swamp, and I now have 3 basic land types because of course my Thran Portal is a swamp. So now when I connect with my Sphinx of Clear Skies, I will have 3 basic land types and I'll get to look at 3 cards. So it is also useful there as well. It is very fringe though. I don't know, how often are people going to be playing this card? It's an interesting one. It is a gate. It does mana fix. It does give you those basic land types. I honestly don't know. That's why I added it to this video, because I don't know how much play this card's going to see. Is it going to see a bunch? It doesn't seem great to just tap my forest or my swamp to add 1 mana and then have to pay the life as well, but it does definitely fit in certain scenarios. How much play is this card going to see? I don't know. Let me know in the comments below. With all these cards, these are a bunch of cards that I looked at. I thought they were interesting. I thought for sure they were going to see a little bit of play in the format. How much are they going to see? Are these good cards in the Commander format? I guess we'll see. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.